Good afternoon, everyone. I am going to actually turn I'm saying hi, but then I'm going to turn my camera off for my presentation, and then I'll turn it back on again when we get to the end, just because I'm not the best at logistics and I'm going to be looking back and forth. So let me go ahead and turn this off, and we'll go ahead and get started. Well, thank you everyone for taking the time to attend this WiLSWorld Shorts on trends in electronic resources. My name is Sara Gold, and I work in new business development and consortium management at WiLS. I've been at WiLS for 17 years, and I have also worked as a young adult librarian. And prior to attending library school, I worked in publishing and for a library distributor. The experience that I have both as a librarian and working for vendors provides me with a unique perspective of seeing the development of electronic resources in response to environmental, social, political, and technological influences, and also to serve as trendsetters. I'm also joined by Andy Coffin, who is the Communications and Consortium Manager at WiLS. Andy facilitates the WiLSWorld Shorts series, and she will be on hand to help with any tech issues as well as to monitor the chat. We will have time at the end of the webinar for questions, so please use the chat to ask questions as they come up, or ask at the end of the webinar. So before we dive in, I'm going to take a moment to talk about the cooperative purchasing service of WiLS. Co-op, as staff refers to it, is the oldest service of WiLS, beginning in the mid-1980s with the sale of floppy disks to members for OCLC records. Today we have a team of 6 managing over 115 vendor partners for over 470 WiLS members. As a consortium, WiLS fills an important role to members through discovery and evaluation of e-resources, in addition to negotiating prices that are sustainable for libraries. WiLS also knows the questions to ask vendors to ensure resources are accessible to students and patrons with accommodations. The majority of the products that WiLS works with are digital in nature, so we have a good overview of what libraries are asking for and how to gauge how new products are being received by our members. And when I was putting together this slideshow, I was really impressed with the number of subscriptions that we've managed since 2016. So I put together an outline for our session today. We'll be starting out with a bit of setting the stage of trends in libraries and subsequently electronic resources that were either prevalent or emerging prior to 2020. Then we'll be moving on into events that have shaped the way libraries and schools have provided services and resources following the March 2020 shutdown of in-person learning and programming at schools, colleges and universities, and public libraries. In addition to the pandemic, there were political and social events that had a profound effect on the resources libraries were asked to provide. After identifying those emergent societal themes and mentioning some significant technological trends, I will share trends we are seeing in e-resources today, some that are shared across library types and some that are unique to academic or public or school libraries. So prior to 2020, the library world was continually advancing through technology trends. AI was not yet a ubiquitous term, and many of the trends in libraries centered around openness, open source, open educational resources, and on-demand in e-resources. Trends included collection shifting from print resources to databases and ebooks and e-journals. With this came the need for an infrastructure to manage a hybrid library of e-resources and print materials. This is when we saw the emergence of Ex Libris Alma and the OCLC WorldShare emerge in the academic sphere. At the same time, the concept of an open source ILS, such as Koha, gained popularity in public libraries. Ebooks and digital audio book platforms that provided digital lending services appeared from a variety of vendors and expanded at a seemingly exponential rate. This was followed by the Simply E, which is now called the Palace Project platform that sought to create a device and app agnostic platform for public library patrons for digital materials. Subject guides, which had once been online bibliographies, developed into sophisticated structured tools, providing resources for library users on specific subject areas. The LibGuide products from SpringShare continue to be mainstays in the academic, school, and public library environments. Patron-centered technologies were prioritized pre-2020 with a proliferation of discovery interfaces and software for event and program management for public libraries. And then in schools, learning management systems were in their infancy, with Google Classroom leading the way. In addition, learning management systems were working on developing student and staff authentication methods to allow seamless connections to databases, ebooks, and digital audiobooks. So Friday, March 13th, 2020 was a day of significance for so many of us. It marked the end of in-person learning and visits to the public library and the beginning of isolation and uncertainty. Schools, colleges, universities, and public libraries closed abruptly and remained closed for a substantial period of time. The theme of openness that had prevailed in previous years halted, and people were left with a void of accurate information, particularly around the COVID-19 virus. Then on May 25th, 2020, Minneapolis police officers murdered George Floyd, which prompted anger and outrage across the United States. People left their homes and took to the streets to protest. Public libraries, schools, and higher education institutions are often places for people to gather in times of crisis, and yet as cities burned, they remained closed to the public. Throughout the remainder of 2020 and 2021, libraries found ways to pivot quickly. Story times became virtual. Digital libraries purchased significantly more titles to help them meet patron demand. Online newspapers and genealogy resources saw a significant increase in usage. Databases that teach languages and hobbies were being discovered by public library patrons that were looking for ways to occupy their time. So I'd like to call attention to a specific example that illustrates the tremendous increase in the use of e-resources during 2020. The Wisconsin Schools Digital Library Consortium is a collection of ebooks and digital audiobooks, as well as magazines for K-12 students in Wisconsin. The consortium launched in January 2018 with 80 districts, and by September 2020, participation increased to 190 districts. Today, the WSDLC has 298 districts as members and serves over 444,000 students. As you can see in this slide, the dramatic increase in individual users that occurred from 2018 to 2020. As a project manager for the WSDLC, I thought that we might see a decrease in users and activity once schools reopened in Wisconsin, but usage has continued to grow since 2020, with the WSDLC just reaching 6 million checkouts this month. And then in this slide, you can see the exponential growth of checkouts year after year over year from 2018 to that September 2020 date. So it was a little bit of luck that we were able to have this consortium up and running prior to the pandemic that we didn't know would happen. In addition to the social and environmental upheaval that occurred throughout 2020, there was a significant political shift in the United States with the November 2020 presidential election. What transpired both before and after the election influenced the trend we see today around information and media literacy. So as we moved through the heart of the pandemic, some themes that would shape the trends that we see today in electronic resources were emerging or re-emerging within the library landscape. I'm going to touch on 3 of them as they provide criteria by which libraries can evaluate resources they offer to patrons and students. And the first one is diversity. Public libraries, schools, and higher ed institutions play an important role in providing diverse materials that reflect the needs and interests of their patrons, students, faculty, and staff. Libraries and consortia like WiLS recognize the importance of being thoughtful and thorough in evaluating resources to select in order to support diversity. WiLS does this through assessing community needs and identifying voices who may be underrepresented. We ask questions and listen to the specific needs and interests of diverse groups within the communities served by our members, and then we make recommendations on digital tools that would be valuable and inclusive. Along those lines, considering cultural sensitivity and authenticity are 2 very important criteria WiLS evaluates when working with vendors. Although we do not claim to be subject to experts, we do know the questions to ask vendors to help ensure resources we market accurately represent diverse cultures, identities, and experiences with sensitivity and respect. A key component of this is to ask if content is created by individuals from the communities being represented. Then thirdly, we look for resources to promote multilingualism by including digital resources in multiple languages to support patrons with diverse linguistic backgrounds. Okay, and the second theme is accessibility. Ensuring that library technology and materials are accessible for people of all abilities is essential for promoting inclusivity and equitable access to information. WiLS actively follows compliance with accessibility standards by asking vendors for a voluntary product accessibility template, or shortened to, you may be familiar with it as VPAT, that outlines how their resources comply with established accessibility standards such as the Web Content Accessibility Guidelines. And these guidelines are meant to address auditory, cognitive, neurological, physical, speech, and visual disabilities. The third theme is trustworthiness. Ensuring that information is trustworthy and accurate is an increasingly challenging task, particularly with the explosion of the use of AI in apps and social media. I have 3 suggestions for promoting trustworthiness in library materials. The first is creating curated digital collections from reputable sources. Librarians have long relied on well-developed collection development policies for print and ebooks, although collection policies around databases are less common. Also, user feedback is important. Libraries use usage stats frequently as a feedback method from patrons. If patrons aren't using a resource, it might not be worth renewing. And then finally, a trend that has seen tremendous growth since 2020 is media or information literacy. incorporating programs to help students and patrons develop critical thinking skills to assess the credibility of online information by evaluating sources and identifying misinformation is an essential component of literacy in today's world. So now that we've established some of the overarching principles that affect what e-resources are created and marketed, we're now at the point of identifying some current trends in electronic resources in 2024. So Marshall Breeding has stated that every type of library drives distinct trends. While all libraries share some core services and values, public, academic, and school libraries each follow distinctive paths related to their main technology infrastructure. Although I acknowledge this to be true, in putting this webinar together, I was really struck by how many trends cross over to each library type. So I'm going to start with the commonalities that we see in each of our library types. And the first one is streaming video. Streaming video has been extremely popular since it was rolled out en masse around 2021. Whether it's used to support curriculum or for entertainment purposes, streaming video collections continue to remain extremely popular. Ebooks, digital magazines, and audiobooks are the next trend. Digital collections continue to increase in usage, with on-demand lending models becoming more popular as a way to mitigate hold times. Also, libraries are comfortable with adding different platforms for e-content as patrons can easily navigate through different apps. Ooh, newspapers. Digital newspapers are one of the biggest challenges and headaches faced by librarians. They are very expensive. It's not uncommon for years of issues to disappear suddenly. There are a few vendors that own the rights to local Wisconsin papers, and the access is not consistent. There is a great interest in digitization of local papers by libraries. However, this has been a very tough nut to crack. The training involved, along with the platform and indexing to make issues searchable, are both cost and time prohibitive. So even though newspapers are challenging, they are a trend that we continue to see a great deal of interest in. Information literacy. There is a specific subset of resources whose main purpose is to teach users how to evaluate news from a variety of sources. Some will overlay existing articles and provide evaluations on how the articles slant ideologically. And then other resources provide students and patrons with guided learning sessions on how to identify manipulated images and text. Another trend is health and wellness databases. Prior to the pandemic, many adults relied on WebMD or Google for medical information, and sadly, many still do. With the proliferation of sponsored articles in search engines, it's increasingly alarming to consider the narrow focus of health information people are receiving from the internet. Thankfully, there are health resources that contain vetted information from trusted medical institutions and facilities that are free from drug company sponsorships and that are written in easy to understand language. As more people rely on sources outside of physician visits, health and wellness resources will remain an important source of information for students and library patrons. Career and job/skills development. We have seen a resurgence of interest in resources that help people search for and prepare to apply and interview for jobs. In addition, learning new skills such as computer programs and test preparation for various career exams are a significant part of what libraries do, and they need resources to help them do it. The idea of flipped classrooms has become very popular over the last couple of years. Flipped classrooms or flipped learning utilizes a method that encourages students to first study topics at their own pace and then apply the knowledge in the classroom with peers and teachers. Flipped learning takes advantage of popular and educational technology such as online video and course management systems, allowing teachers to use class time for hands-on learning, coaching, and mentoring instead of content delivery. This is the flipped classroom has been utilized in both K-12 schools as well as higher ed institutions. Badging. Although these look like something that you might have received in Girl Scouts or Boy Scouts, badging and digital badges in particular offer opportunities to recognize individuals' accomplishments, skills, qualities, or interests, and help set goals, motivate behavior, represent achievement, and communicate success in learning offered through schools, professional settings, or daily life. Proponents view badges as part of a fundamental change in learning, away from traditional texts and lecture methods to multiple knowledge streams such as media, collaboration, interest-based learning, and project-based learning. Badging may be seen as an alternative to traditional forms of educational assessment and recognition. So badging and flipped classrooms often will go hand in hand, and you may hear vendors or see in some of the products that you subscribe to, the resources that you subscribe to, that they have a badging component to them. Okay, the maker movement. Makerspaces have seen a resurgence in schools and public libraries post-pandemic. Libraries and media centers now provide access to tools such as 3D printers, laser cutters, design plans, as well as components such as circuit boards to provide individuals with opportunities to invent and create in ways which previously may have been limited to manufacturers or businesses. This access, coupled with easier forms of communication, such as online spaces that allow individuals to come together around shared passions, expertise, or questions, and then the distribution through e-commerce sites, have created a community of makers. New approaches to language learning. Language learning software has been around for a long time. It has recently received a refresh due to new learning methods, including the gamification of learning and integrating TV and movies as a holistic language learning approach. Early literacy support. So both schools and public libraries continue to support literacy learning for the youngest students and patrons through creative play-based learning resources. Of course, they also engage in programming, but the shift from in-person programming to online programming during the pandemic did necessitate the need for online resources that help reinforce early literacy skills in children. I think there's also a certain amount of catch up that is being done with children that were just at the beginning stages of either they were pre-literate or just beginning literacy skills during the pandemic. And they are playing catch up in terms of their skills and practicing their literacy skills. So e-journals, journals to support faculty and teaching have always been a significant resource and expense for academic libraries, and they continue to be so. So did not want to leave those off of the list. And then resources to support specific areas of curriculum. Media specialists work with their teachers to add e-resources that support curriculum. In addition to the humanities and STEM, areas such as financial literacy have seen an increase in interest over the last couple of years. Social emotional learning is incorporated into schools on a daily basis from pre-K to high school. There are now excellent resources available to help students, help teach students how to develop and maintain social emotional health and skills, both inside and outside of the classroom. And then finally, we reached the concept of artificial intelligence, or AI. On one hand, AI has so much potential for development and growth in both teaching and learning. And on the other hand, it is a tool that is ripe for manipulation and exploitation. AI developments rely on deep learning, machine learnings, and natural language processing that help computers accomplish specific tasks by processing large amounts of training data to help the system recognize patterns, input data to drive predictions, and feedback data for improving accuracy over time. So many of us are familiar with chatbots such as ChatGPT that were created to assist users in various tasks, from answering questions to providing recommendations based on user preference. AI has the potential to become an invaluable tool for organizing and making accessible large collections of information. On the other hand, as AI becomes more adept at generating content, it could further complicate users' navigation of the information environment. Artificial intelligence will be able to manipulate facial expressions on video in real time using a human puppet. They can change the light source and shadows in any picture. They can generate sound effects based on mute video and resurrect characters using old clips. Many of these effects have given rise to the deep fakes that manipulate video and other images. As with other technologies, AI may become one more development that libraries help communities better understand. For example, if AI becomes a serious threat to jobs, libraries' roles in workforce development may become even more important, but also more complicated. The new workforce development demands will likely require higher order critical, creative, and innovative thinking, as well as emotional engagement, placing a greater value on the quality of thinking, listening, relating, collaborating, and learning. Librarians are poised to be leaders in this type of learning. So we've come to the end of the exploration of trends, but that is by no means a comprehensive list, but rather a sampling of what I see in my work, as well as through research of others in the field of librarianship. And I would like to open it up to any questions or comments. Okay, I'm not seeing or hearing any. But I did want to let you know that I put together some additional readings. I can't help it as a librarian, and I wanted to call attention to an outstanding book on AI by Ethan Mollick called Co-Intelligence, Living and Working with AI. It was published this year. I was able to hear him speak at the ISTE conference this summer. And he really has both a simple and sophisticated way of incorporating AI into everyday life. And I also really appreciated the positivity that he brings to such a new and large technology. In addition, I have included my contact information and links to the list of vendors and products that WiLS partners with. You may have noticed that I didn't name specific vendors or products in this session, specifically with the trends, and that was intentionally done in order to be vendor agnostic. However, if you're interested in learning about specific products and vendors, please do reach out to me or the co-op team, and I'm happy to do an overview of resources. It looks like I was able to give you back a little bit of your Friday. Thank you so much for joining. Oh, I'm looking at a. Okay. Thanks so much, everybody, for joining. This has been recorded, and I believe that Andy will share the recording out. And again, if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to me. Thanks so much, everyone.